It's Miss West. I'm filming at night because I don't know about you, but my sleep schedule is like super off and I just cannot seem to get back to my school day sleeping routine. So hopefully when we go back to school, which will hopefully be on April 27th, I will be able to wake at the time I'm supposed to and sleep when I'm supposed to. But for now, I'm up when I'm up. So this video today is for the world history students. So last week I posted a text about the age of exploration and some questions to go along with that. So today's video is going to accompany two more texts that I post, or one more document that I posted. It contains two texts, and these are both primary documents. So what we're going to do today is we're going to read and analyze and annotate and kind of break down those primary documents, and it's going to build off of the age of exploration stuff. So if you need to take a second and remind yourself what the age of exploration what the age of exploration text was about, go grab it, review your answers, and I'll see you back here in just a sec.
The Silk Road was, of course, an extremely lucrative trading route for a period of almost 2,000 years. Lots of items were traded across the Silk Road, east and west, but it was really dangerous and it was really difficult. Merchants had to travel across mountains and through deserts, and it was a place that a lot of people died trying to trade on. In the 1400s, the world was really, as Europeans knew it, pretty small. The North and South American continents had not yet been discovered. Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain agreed to fund a voyage west of Europe, and Christopher Columbus was the person who sailed on that voyage. When he met the Taino people in the Bahamas, which he thought were the Indies, he effectively discovered for Europe that there was a continent between Europe and Asia in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean.
So your job today is going to be to read two primary documents, one written by Christopher Columbus and one written by a man named Bartolome de las Casas, because you're going to try to figure out, are those paintings, those pictures of Columbus and his men meeting this group of naked, generous, kind of awe-inspired native people, is that an accurate depiction of what happened when the Spanish got to Central America? Because that's the story that we've been told, and that's why we have a Columbus Day on the calendar in October, to commemorate the day that Columbus triumphantly made his way to the Bahamas. So our task today as historians is to determine what truth is there in those paintings. So we understand that the Silk Road necessitated travel across the ocean, because traveling across the continent was way too expensive and way too dangerous. And once Columbus got to the land barrier in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean that he wasn't expecting, because he thought he could just circle around the globe and come to the other side of Asia. Once he got there, this whole relationship between Europe and North and South and Central America began. So what was the nature of that relationship? That's what we're going to find out when we go to our primary documents. So make sure you have those documents with you. If you don't, at least have a pen and paper so that you can kind of take notes on what we do, and I will see you with the documents. Okay, so the first thing that you do when you are analyzing a primary document, you should remember this, is that you look for the textual information. So that is who wrote it, when did they write it, what is it, and who was supposed to read it. So this was written by Columbus in 1493. It's a report on his first voyage. And if you look at the second page of this document, you can see that it says Christopher Columbus's letter to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella in 1493. So this is a letter that Columbus wrote to the people who were paying for his voyage, and he's explaining what it is that he found. So the first thing that I want you to do when you are reading a primary document like this is I want you to scan it and circle all the words that look unfamiliar to you. So you're not reading it, you're just scanning it for words that you might need to look up or words that you might need to use context clues to figure out the meaning of. So I'm going to use my pen to kind of track, because I think it helps me stay in the right line, especially when things aren't double spaced like this. So I'm just gonna kind of track here. I don't really know what that means. That word looks familiar, but I don't know why it has a capital S. And I'm going, see, timorous, I don't know what that is. Incurably. Oh, guileless. Crockery. I know what an acute angle is, but I don't know when a person can be acute. Okay, so now that we've gone through and circled all the words that might be unfamiliar to us, now we can start to use some context clues to figure this out, because we don't always have access to the internet when we're reading things like this. And even though we could just look it up, which is something I do all the time, sometimes it's nice to just like use your brain and see if you can figure it out with the information that you do have. So I'm going to read the first paragraph. Since I know that you will be pleased at the great victory with which our Lord has crowned my voyage, I write this to you, from which you will learn how in 33 days I passed from the Canary Islands to the Indies, with the fleet which the most illustrious king and queen, our sovereigns, gave to me. There I found many islands filled with innumerable people, and I have taken possession of them all for their highnesses. Done by proclamation and with the royal standard unfurled, and no opposition was offered to me. So I see that illustrious is very close in the sentence to king and queen. So I can assume that it's describing king and queen, because the most illustrious king and queen, like if you took most and illustrious out of that sentence, you could still have the king and queen, and most is an adjective describing well, actually, most is an adverb because it's describing this, which is an adjective. Illustrious kind of sounds like illustrate, but we're not drawing pictures of the king and queen. But this is Columbus thanking the people who paid for his voyage. So it probably is a positive adjective. It's probably something that is a good thing to be called illustrious. And then sovereigns, I remember in civics we talked about the word sovereign. Countries are sovereign if they don't have any government above them, but this is sovereign with a capital S, so that makes me think that it's actually in reference to king and queen. So a sovereign is when it's a noun, which it is being used as here, it is the leader of a sovereign country, in which case sovereign is an adjective. All right, there I found very many islands filled with innumerable people. So the word there's almost a word in here, number. Whenever in is in front of a word as a prefix, that means not. So if something is incomprehensible, it's not comprehensible. If someone is incompetent, it means they're not competent. So innumerable, a number. So if it's not a number, and there's many islands and they are filled, innumerable probably means like a lot. You can't count, uncountable people. So there's tons of people, and I've taken possession of them. That's interesting. Done by proclamation and with the royal standard unfurled. So a standard here is a noun because it's the standard, the royal standard. I know that like in war,
when you go to war, countries will have a flag. And so maybe that's what it means. And then to unfurl something, again, just like in as a prefix is like not. So if it's not furled, furled sounds like curled. So unfurled, maybe it's the flag is unfurled. And no opposition was offered to me. So what I'd like you to do for the rest of this document is I'd like you to read through it, and I want you to think, what is the tone of this document? How does Columbus describe the people on the island that he has interacted with? And does this document match the paintings that we saw at the beginning of the video? So what's the tone, and how does Columbus describe the Taino people? Do that. Pause the video, do that, and then come back and we'll do part 2. Okay, so once you have read Columbus's letter to the King and Queen of Spain, I want you to move on to the second document in the PDF that I posted online. And same thing, we're going to look at who wrote this, when they wrote it, what it is, and then who is the intended audience. So for this one, because we have some background information, I'm just going to read the background information. So this was written by somebody named Bartolome de las Casas. And when you see 2 dates like this in parentheses, those typically indicate the year that somebody was born and the year they died. So Bartolome de las Casas, a priest, a Dominican missionary, and a prolific early Spanish historian, was a student of Latin and theology in Seville, Spain, when the news arrived in 1493 that Christopher Columbus's successful first voyage. A little more than a decade later, Casas took part in a journey to and exploration of Hispaniola, that is, Haiti and the Dominican Republic. But once he became a priest, probably in 1510, Casas increasingly came to regret his own moral blindness, and he called for an end to brutal exploitation and enslavement of the native peoples. The Spanish government named him the protector of the Indians, and in 1520 to 1522, he undertook a project off the coast of Venezuela to establish a town of free Indians. This venture, however, proved a failure, as Spain, in the first decades of the 16th century, extended its range of conquest and harsh rule. Through appeal and negotiation, Casas did manage to gain support for reforms from the Pope and Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor and King of Spain. But these were nearly impossible to implement and sustain, and Charles V later revoked key laws and provisions on behalf of the Indian peoples that Casas had argued for. Below is an excerpt from The Devastation of the Indies, a brief account, 1542 to 1546, published in 1552, in which Casas describes horrible tortures imposed by the Spanish on the natives they encountered in Hispaniola. For biography and context, consult the following titles by Lewis Hanks. So if we wanted to do some extra research, we could do this research here. So this a couple key differences between this document and Columbus's letter. First of all, this is a book. It was published well after Columbus's first landing in the Bahamas. It was published in 1552. It also gives an account of a 4-year period well after Columbus was in the Bahamas. So De las Casas is not describing Columbus specifically, but he is describing the way the Spanish treated the Taino people. So what I'd like you to do is the same thing with this document that we did with the last document. I want you to scan it first and circle any unknown words. Don't worry about reading it the first time, just kind of scan for words that look unfamiliar. Then I want you to read it closely and pay attention to the tone. How does De las Casas describe the way that Spanish explorers and Spanish settlers treated the native people that they encountered when they were settling in the Caribbean and what is now Central America? When you're finished with that, come on back to the video and I'll explain what I want you to do last.
So hopefully you've had a chance to read both Columbus's letter to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand and the excerpt from De las Casas's book, The Devastation of the Indies. So what I want you to think about now is you're going to contrast the two documents. And I want you to this would be, if we were in school, we would do a Socratic seminar about these two documents. And our central question is, how did the Spaniards treat the people they encountered as they explored the New World? So I want you to think about that. Jot down some ideas. Make sure that you're referencing evidence from the text when you come up with those ideas. And you can have kind of a multi-layered answer if that is appropriate based on your research. And next week, we're going to be looking at some of the other consequences of Spanish exploration and kind of the longer term ramifications of Spanish exploration and settlement. But for today, I want you to just think about these two documents and contrasting them. How did the Spanish treat the native people they encountered? So that's your essential question. Good luck. If you have any questions, please email me. If you jot down your ideas, if you write a paragraph describing how the Spanish treated the Taino people, please send it to me. I would love to read what you write. And as always, I miss you. I hope you're doing well. Bye.